Facepalm America. I'm Beowulf Racklin, facepalmamerica.com. You can always go there if you want to find out more information about the show, if you want to connect with us on social media, or if you would like to listen to past episodes, and I encourage you to do that. I also encourage you, as I do each Monday and throughout the week, to visit John Rothman's podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothman. He has a breadth of knowledge that is unsurpassed when it comes to the world of politics, and so for that reason, we discuss such things every Monday here on Facepalm America. John, welcome to Facepalm. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
So there was some, what I would say, disconcerting news over the weekend. A poll came out, produced in part by the New York Times, finding that in 5 critical battleground states, and admittedly we are a year away from the 2024 presidential election, that Biden was behind Donald Trump in, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Wisconsin was the only one he was ahead in. Clearly there's a lot of time, but there has also been a lot of concern about a number of different aspects of Biden's candidacy, and also of great concern to all of those in America who support democracy, the idea of Donald Trump coming anywhere close again to the Oval Office. What are your thoughts about these very startling numbers?
Well, first of all, we're a year away from a presidential election. Secondly, a lot can happen between now and the conventions. I was reflecting earlier today on my own podcast that if this were November of 1967, I could not have predicted that Lyndon Johnson would withdraw as a candidate for president, nor could I have predicted the impact of the candidacies of Eugene McCarthy and Robert Kennedy, nor could I have predicted the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and then of Bobby Kennedy, nor could I have predicted that Richard Nixon would emerge as the Republican candidate for president and would be elected. These were all improbabilities. I think that is a key factor in all of this. Also, one of the factors in the poll, which you mentioned, is that if Donald Trump were to be convicted of any particular crime, and remember, today is a civil case, it's not a criminal case.
Right.
But if he were to be convicted of a crime, his numbers would diminish. I must tell you honestly that I find it incomprehensible that the Republican Party would nominate Donald Trump for president. It makes no sense to me. Not whether you agree or disagree with his politics or his policies, but the simple fact the man is under indictment. And
yeah. I mean, you would hope that in terms of practical sense, the Republican Party would just have more of it. I mean, let alone what the implications are of a Trump presidency. But in terms of winning the White House, if that is your one and only goal, it would not really seem that altogether, in most ways of looking at it, Donald Trump at this late stage of the game certainly would be the best way of achieving that particular goal. And yet they persist, unfortunately.
Let me just tell you, I was part of a 1964 campaign, deeply involved. I was California chairman of the Youth for Rockefeller. And of course, we lost the primary to Goldwater. And the simple fact, Beowulf, was that we knew Goldwater could not win the election.
Yeah.
But there was a devotion, a blind devotion to Barry Goldwater. Yeah. And that was how he won the nomination. And I will tell you that my feeling at the time was Republicans didn't care whether they won the election. They cared about who they nominated and who controlled the Republican Party. Right. Donald Trump today is a major factor in the Republican Party. If Republicans could choose a candidate today, he would clearly be the overwhelming choice. I have to have faith in the American people, but there's another dimension to this, and that has to do with Joe Biden. Let me tell you, I've been a supporter of Joe Biden for years. I supported him when he first ran for president in 1987, and of course withdrew before the 88 campaign over all of those issues. I believe Joe Biden is extremely able. I think he's been a very capable president. I think if I were teaching my course on the American presidency and I evaluated just his presidency up to this point, he would get stellar analysis from me. But the simple truth is he is over 80, that he is slowing down, that there must be a question raised about whether or not he can survive another term, right, and whether he can put up with the rigors of a campaign. I'm not saying that I believe he can't, but I'm saying that the question marks are real. Most of the opposition to Joe Biden does not come from his policies. It comes from the perception of his age. So my sense is that Democrats and Republicans both have a lot to wrestle with. My own conclusion is that I think this poll is wrong. And if you think my accuracy in polling, let me just remind you about President Landon, who won the polls in the Literary Digest, which hadn't been wrong since 1916, but in 1936 got it wrong. Or Tom Dewey in 1948. We all remember President Dewey.
Yes.
And the Kiplinger magazine headline, I have the original magazine with the headline, "What Dewey Will Do." Well, he didn't do a darn thing because he didn't win.
Although I will have to point out that in terms of both 1936 and 1948, the polling methodology, and it can still be off, has improved significantly since that time.
Yes, but if I wanted to point out, and I can if you want to spend the next half an hour doing this, point out all the polls that have been wrong consistently in modern days. So my point is, all polls are a snapshot in time. They also represent a bias by the pollsters. I had a tremendous revelation today that I'm sharing with you for the first time. I think perhaps the people who conduct the poll want Trump to be nominated, want to give him that opportunity, believing that when the American people really confront a Donald Trump presidency, they will resoundingly say no.
Well,
we'll see.
That was an approach that the Hillary Clinton campaign took in 2016, much to my chagrin and much to the chagrin, I think, of the American people. So I have questions about that approach. Let me say that.
May I offer one note of hope here?
Yes.
If you analyze issues, the question of women's right to choose, among others, Donald Trump is on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
And I believe that when you look at the polls, and let's remind you, this is Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. If the vote is on the issue, just that issue alone, he'll lose. And it's just that simple.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think if there would be no question if the vote were on the issue. And I guess, and they note in the New York Times story that if you look at what happened in 2022, it was really went far more in favor of the Democrats than was expected, and that's all well and good. But there is such a particular difference between when you have an issue on the ballot and when you have a person on the ballot. And I think that there is a combination. Certainly, the age issue comes into question, but I think even more, there is a significant portion of the base of the Democratic Party that is not satisfied with Joe Biden as a candidate in particular, and perhaps do not view him as someone who would be the champion for an issue like Roe versus Wade that you would hope. And you certainly have to say that in 2020 he was the most conservative Democrat on the ballot in primary states.
They won't vote for Trump. I believe the American people will not put Trump in the White House. Now, you might say to me, but John, maybe it's that you just want to believe that, and maybe that's true. But I think when the court cases dealing with January 6th, dealing with what happened in Georgia, we're watching his lawyers pleading guilty. And I'm going to tell you what I'm really waiting for. Mark Meadows on the stand. And yes, Mike Pence on the stand. Because I believe that the indictment against Donald Trump will be proven by the people who surrounded him. So today, looking at all of this, I think we're in for a fascinating ride. And it means, Beowulf, if I may be so bold as to say, you and I will have a lot to talk about for the next year.
We will have an enormous amount to talk about for the next year. And there do seem to be some glimmers of hope, because you see how the Republican Party is beginning to respond, and perhaps historically that gives you some renewed faith. We see that Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds has endorsed Ron DeSantis. I wonder if you think that perhaps this is a point of light towards the end of the tunnel that would lead you to believe that Republicans are finally starting to shake themselves of the Trump delusion.
I don't believe that DeSantis is going to be the nominee. I think he's a very weak candidate.
True
I
enough.
think he's run a very weak campaign.
Right, but just the fact that they're willing to consider and publicly endorse somebody else beyond its impacts on DeSantis or not seems to me to be a hopeful thing.
It is. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking now at Nikki Haley. Now, let me explain to you that right now she's coming up in the polls. Mm-hmm. A lot of people like her very much. There'll be a debate later this week, which I guess we can't cover till next week. Right. But it'll be interesting to see. And remember, this is a fluid situation, and we just have to wait now and see. I think what is interesting, and what I'm sad about in a way, is we'll never have a 1940 with a Wendell Willkie or a 1952 with an Adlai Stevenson, because you can't run at the last minute. There can't be a convention where someone is drafted. That whole dynamic of a fluid situation is gone, and that's
unfortunate. I think. It's unfortunate. I think. I wish there were more flexibility in the respective structures of each party, so that sort of thing was possible. So that in times of crisis, or times where for the majority of folks who supported the party and felt like they weren't going in the direction, there were another option. But it seems to be becoming more calcified over the course of time. Yep,
you're right. And that's, I think, a tremendous weakness in the American political system.
Yeah, it really is. And a weakness, unfortunately, that we are experiencing here in the United States is the continuing of hate crimes as a result of what is going on in Israel, what is going on in Gaza, and certainly while we can't ignore the horrors that are going on there, they are having direct repercussions here. And I'll bring a couple of items to your attention. One in which someone was trying to run their car into what they thought was a Jewish school. Fortunately, due to their stupidity, it was not a Jewish school. It was in fact the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge, which is actually a part of a hate group, which has nothing to do with Jews. But nevertheless, that someone would run their car into a place that they thought was a Jewish school is a frightful thing indeed. And then just locally in your neck of the woods at Stanford, a Muslim student was hospitalized after hateful remarks were shouted at him, run over with a car. We continue to see this outpouring of hatred, and it is disturbing, and we need to step back from the precipice. If Donald Trump has taught us nothing else, we need to understand that we need to step back from that precipice of hate, because it has horrific impacts on our nation.
I agree. I spoke last night in Modesto, California, to a mixed crowd of people, and it amazed me. They had to have 2 police officers present, and I think they had some undercover people as well. It was simply a review of the movie about Golda Meir and a panel discussion about that. And to think that wherever Jews gather now, there must be this sense of fear. And for those listening to us who are not Jews, I want you to understand very clearly, in my life, I have never seen the kind of hatred which is being expressed toward Jews. And this has to do with a manifestation, not only in the United States, but in Europe. You know what happened in Vienna. They had a memorial for the Holocaust. This happened last weekend. And in that memorial were Torah scrolls, there were prayer books, were Jewish sacred items. And you know what happened, Beowulf? It was torched. It was burned down, almost to the day of Kristallnacht in 1938. It was a shock